Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Daily Bolt with your host, Dr. Jeff Tilley. Today's topic, ultra cool Legos. Sit back and relax and enjoy today's podcast. So today's podcast comes to us from the field of low temperature physics and from experiments that scientists at Lancaster University, which is in England, did to measure the amount of insulating capability that Lego blocks would have. And you might wonder, well, who would ever pay for this type of study? And it really comes back to the fact that the Legos that you see in the stores, you can go buy them at Walmart, are made from a particular type of plastic called acrylonitrile butadiene styrene, or ABS. And I think I'm just going to use ABS for the rest of this podcast because I have enough trouble saying that. This is a plastic that is known for being very strong, being durable, and that's why it's good for children's toys, because things happen to Legos and Lego structures. They get kicked, they get thrown around rooms, otherwise broken. And as those of you who are parents might know, Legos are practically indestructible under normal conditions. You can break them. It is possible to definitely break them. ABS plastic is also used as keys in many computer keyboards, in particular standard keyboards and some laptops. Now, why are we interested in this type of plastic? Why are we interested in Legos? It's because there are applications, cryogenic engineering, certain types of computing, where insulating properties of materials are critical. You don't want there to be too much heat necessarily getting into a low temperature environment and wrecking what you're trying to do in terms of low temperature materials. And many of the materials that we know as being extremely good thermal insulators, particularly for very low temperature applications, are very expensive. And so there's always been, in the last couple of decades, efforts to find materials that are relatively cheap to produce and still have really good thermal insulating properties. And some of these materials that are currently used and are expensive are very closely related to ABS plastics. So there have been some tests done with other types of ABS plastic materials before. They found that while they're good insulators, they're not necessarily as good as these other very expensive materials that have specific names. One of them's called Vespril. One of them's called Macor or Macor. I don't know exactly how you pronounce that. Those are expensive. They exist. They're used currently in any low temperature application that's needed. And they also tend to have fairly good strength properties so that they won't break very easily. So the scientists at the University of Lancaster, or Lancaster University, I guess is the better way to say it, in England, did this study, which has been published in an open access journal called Scientific Reports. It was published just before Christmas, where they set up what's called a dilution refrigerator, and they put a stack of 4 Legos tightly put together into this dilution refrigerator, which is designed basically to extract heat out from the environment and get it as low of a temperature as possible. The temperatures that are reached in this dilution refrigerator are on the order of 0.0015 kelvins. And that is just above the absolute zero temperature that we believe that all molecular and subatomic motion stops in all materials, and thus the lowest possible temperature that can be attained in any material. And for those of you who don't often deal in the Kelvin scale, which means most non-scientists, you're used to perhaps the Celsius scale or the Fahrenheit scale. So we're talking about temperatures here of about minus 459.67 degrees Fahrenheit, minus 273.1 5 Celsius. And the idea is to see what the properties of heat transfer of the Lego blocks are. And surprisingly, the Lego materials do at least as well as the Macor or the Vespral materials that are far, far more expensive. And the reason that the Legos apparently have such low thermal conductivity relates to their design as much as the ABS plastic material. The fact that you have these little studs on the top of standard Lego blocks that you put other blocks on top of, and if they fit snugly, you have a relatively small amount of air in the Legos that can conduct heat as well. You have almost a partial vacuum, and that helps the heat transfer between individual Legos be a lot less than what might be between more loosely fitting ABS plastic materials. That is the belief of the scientists with their experimental setup. Within their dilution refrigerator, they put 4 Legos, one of each color, common color anyway, red, yellow, blue, and green, stacked on top of each other, red at the bottom, green at the top. I don't know if the color has anything to do with it or not. I would probably suspect not. And they measured the thermal conductivity of the stack of Legos. And they really believe it is this high-resistant, solid-solid connection between the Lego blocks with the studs that makes the thermal conductivity so low. And what this means is not only might you be able to just go out and use Legos, common Legos for a very strong insulating material, but since Legos in some of the manufacturing processes are produced by 3D printers, you could also, if you own a 3D printer and you have access to ABS plastic, use a 3D printer to very inexpensively generate a very strong insulating material. So it's kind of cool. Actually, it's very cool. And so were the Legos in the experiment. Who knows? And who knew that you could use Legos for this type of application? Well, we do now. That's all for this edition of the Daily Bolt. I'm Dr. Jeff Tilley, wishing you a happy new year, and good night, good morning, good afternoon, and God bless.